Hello, everyone. My name is Sumaiyah Khan, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement for the Muslim community. We are here tonight for part 4 of our Explaining Hajj series. Today, we're going to be talking about the sacrifice that traditionally happens on the third day of Hajj. With us to talk about this and the story behind it is Ahmed Shaheed. Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. Why don't you start just by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Wa alaikum assalam. That means peace be upon you. I'm Imam Ahmed Shaheed. I was born Muslim. My parents actually became Muslim before I was born, in the tradition, in the same way Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar became Muslim. I was born Muslim, and one of the funny stories is that my particular parents were nominated to go on Hajj by their community, and that Hajj trip was paid for by Muhammad Ali. That was back in 1977.
Wow.
And so so my parents left me with someone else when I was a very little baby, a couple of months old, and went on Hajj. And so that was their first Hajj trip. And for me, I am married to my beautiful wife, and we have 2 kids, 5 and 7. And our honeymoon actually ended up being a trip to Hajj. So 3 months after we were married, it was right before Ramadan, and we got married right before Ramadan, the month of fasting. And so we left that month of Ramadan. I'd already had intentions to go on Hajj, and my wife said, well, let's do it. And so that was our honeymoon, was going on the trip to Hajj back in 2012, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing. Even when I went to Hajj, I went with my husband, and our whole group was couples. We had gotten like one of those economy packages that are, a little more affordable. And it was literally all couples who had gone, like some recently married, some married a long time, but it was really, really fun. And it's a nice thing to do together. I think that's a perfect honeymoon.
I totally agree. I think we learned a lot about each other in that Hajj trip, because Hajj is a struggle. But we became stronger for it. So I greatly appreciate that opportunity. And a little bit more about myself. I'm a project manager by profession. I have a mechanical engineering degree and an MBA from the University of Houston. And my mechanical engineering degree, being a project manager for a natural gas pipeline company, ended up being how I became an imam. The local imam of the masjid there in Houston ran into a problem. Hurricane Ike came through and it destroyed the roof of the masjid. And it was so much so that they had to, it was cheaper to build a new masjid than try to replace the roof. Oh, and so as they went to construct a new masjid, they were looking for a project manager in the community to help manage the building of the masjid. And when the imam approached me, I'm like, hey, I'm a project manager. I build pipelines. They go underground. I don't know anything about building houses, especially places of worship. It's like, it's the same thing. And, coming from a community and a generation of service, I said yes. And so I started managing the construction of Masjid Warthabi Muhammad in Houston. And then one day he was like, hey, I can't make it for Jumu'ah. Can you do Jumu'ah? Jumu'ah is our Friday prayer. So he asked me to give the sermon, the big sermon that we have as Muslim on Friday. And I'm like, hey, Imam, again, I'm a project manager. I never said I was an Imam. And, the rest is history. So I'm now Imam of assistant imam of 2 masjids. That's what we call mosque here in the city of Houston.
That's amazing. That is quite a story. I feel like that's how a lot of times we get put into things. Like I feel like God just puts things in our path and we're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but okay. And then it always works out for the best. So let's jump into our topic for tonight. So we're supposed to talk about the sacrifice, and I thought we would start by talking about the story behind it. And so in some of our previous explainer videos, we've talked about how the Prophet Ibrahim as we call him, his story is basically what the foundation for a lot of the different things that happen in Hajj. So can you just share with us what's the story behind this particular part?
All right. So the story about the sacrifice comes, how best to put it, to sort of start it off and give you a little bit of context
Yeah.
about it. We typically have, as human beings, we typically like to have a celebration that comes after a momentous event. So, for our Christian brothers and sisters, it would be Easter. So the resurrection. You have Easter Sunday, and you have a lot of activities and celebration around Easter. Same for Christmas. After the birth of, as Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus, there's a big celebration around Christmas. So, as Muslims, we have two major celebrations. We have one that comes after the end of the month of Ramadan, which is the end of the month of fasting, called Eid al-Fitr, which is kind of returning to our nature. So, after we, stop doing eating, drinking, having conjugal relation, all the things that give us life during the day as a means of uh, getting better self-control and self-restraint. After we come out of that period of 30 days of building a habit of really obedience and worship, we have a celebration called Eid al-Fitr. And so after the most important day of the Hajj, which is the day of Arafah, which is the day when we go to Mount Arafah and we pray, and that if you miss this day, you miss the whole Hajj. After the most important day of the Hajj, we come down off the mountain, go to Muzdalifah, spend the night, and then we wake up and it is the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, and this is the day of the sacrifice. And so this Eid al-Adha is the festival of the sacrifice, just like Eid al-Fitr is like the festival of returning to your nature. And so it is a commemoration of Abraham's sacrifice or attempt, almost sacrifice of his son. And so the way the story goes in Islam, and I say his son for a specific reason, because in the Quran, it does not explicitly state which son of Abraham is along with him on this journey. There is a lot of scholarship and commentary that points to it being Ishmael. Ishmael and Abraham are also the father and son team who helped build the Kaaba, the place where all the Muslims all around the world turn to worship and to pray. And it is in that direction of that particular building that all Muslims around the world pray to. So is very likely and is very much supported in Islam that it is Abraham and his son Ishmael. So Abraham and Ishmael, the way the Quran displays the story, that Abraham has a vision, a dream, that he has to sacrifice his son. And just to give a little further context, again, remember, Abraham was whether it be from the biblical text or the Quranic text, Abraham was someone who was very sincere and devout in his worship. And he had been asking his creator, his guardian, his evolver, for a child, a progeny, for a very long time. And he was old enough that, this was unlikely event at this stage in his life, but he was still asking. He still had the faith. He didn't give up hope, and that faith was rewarded. And he finally got what he had been praying for. He got a son. Actually, as the biblical and Quranic stories go, he ends up with two sons. So, but he is eventually asked to sacrifice the very thing that he had been praying to God for.
Hey, the most precious thing to him.
The most precious thing that he had. And so, in the Quranic story, I always find it really touching, because I have two sons, that when he shares this dream with his son says, if Allah willed it, if our Lord willed it, you will find me an obedient servant. His son was brought up in such a way that he didn't say, oh no, he didn't. He was willing to do and to follow and to be as obedient as his father was obedient in that particular point. And so they go to the mountain, and Ishmael is laid out, and just before the knife comes down, the angel Jibril or Gabriel comes down and says, no, you have fulfilled the vision. It was your willingness, basically, that Allah, God, wanted to see. And so here is a ram, and sacrifice the ram instead. And so again, we have this beautiful story. We have this celebration that commemorates the sacrifice of the thing that you really wanted the most, the thing that you had most prayed for, your willingness to sacrifice, and showing that you were willing to sacrifice anything to be obedient to your Lord.
That's amazing. And actually, like the way you phrase that makes me think of like Hajj as a whole, right? Is a sacrifice. Like we sacrifice so much money, we sacrifice time, and then when you're there, you really are at like a bare minimum of everything. Like when it comes to clothing, when it comes to, everyone's on the same level, and everything is just just down to the basics, and it's just you and God, you and Allah.
Yeah, and another thing that's kind of important that you're just a symbolism from this is that you're sacrificing something living, and it's just like we are living. The things that make us, I think it's Martin Luther King that says, if a man hasn't found something that he's willing to die for, he isn't fit to live. That it's a willingness to sacrifice your desires, your passions, those things that you prayed for, to make them obedient, and just to throw it away. It's not like, sometimes we think of a sacrifice as something we sacrifice and throw it away, but no, what we do as a part of this sacrifice is we sacrifice that thing to make it better. So the meat, the animal, whether it be a lamb, a goat, a sheep, or a camel, as Muslims, when we perform the sacrifice, when we say Bismillah with the name of Allah, we slaughter the animal, we clean it, we cook it, and we eat it. The family takes 1/3, and you give the other 2/3 to the community, those who are in need, the poor and the needy. And so, again, you're kind of, another way of looking at it is if you had your favorite car. Say you had, a Range Rover SUV that you keep pristine. You put all your, you work very hard for it. You love it. And then you sacrifice it to make it a part of the toddler carpool. You have 12 other toddlers all in backseat, and they're eating Cheerios and applesauce, and your kid's in there. So you're getting 1/3 of the value out of it, but you give the other 2/3 of the value of this beautiful car that you worked for to the kids, and who are less fortunate, who didn't have the transportation and transporting them around. It's that type of useful sacrifice.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about like how it happens now, right? Because we talked a little bit about this before, but like around 2 million people go to Hajj every year. So how does that work? What do they do?
All right. So for the most part, most people who pay for a trip to go on Hajj, they buy what is called a sacrifice voucher. So you buy your sacrifice voucher, and that means that you paid your probably, probably as little as maybe 150, and it can kind of go up. It depends on what your personal ability is in terms of the sacrifice. But you get your voucher, and basically they are bringing in animals from the region and probably almost internationally to serve this need. Because again, you have 2-3 million people who are all required to sacrifice an animal at that point in time. And so there's no one range within the desert that has all of those animals. So you have to bring all those animals in. They do most of the sacrifice in slaughterhouses on the outskirts of Mecca, near Mina. And quite often, because as Muslims, we have to, one of the things we ask with the slaughter is that you say Bismillah. You might also want the name of your family said. And so that your particular sacrifice is done is sometimes you might get a text message. It's very computerized now. So you get your voucher, you'll get a text to say, it was done properly. When I went on Hajj, we paid for it as a part of our trip, and someone cooked it, and we ate a little bit of it that night. And you'll see that, the food on the day of Eid al-Adha, on that day, see the government is giving out food and meals, hot food and meals to everybody, any of the pilgrims who are on the street. And again, because Hajj is a requirement and people sometimes barely have enough money to make the trip. This is a true blessing, because this is a meal that they might not have been able to afford otherwise. Right. And so many pilgrims get their money this way. And then even for those who are not on Hajj, Muslims around the world, I know for me, once I came home and I had my first son, I really felt connected to Eid al-Adha and this experience. And so I made sure that the following Eid al-Adha, I did the sacrifice myself. And you can, even here in America, you can find halal farms and places where you can go to slaughter the animal, and they'll clean it, skin it, dress it, give you the meat, and then you can distribute it how you see fit within the community. Some people even give money so that you can just give, so that the meat can be given to starving nations and starving individuals around the world. So there's a lot of, so it's all about, kind of giving and sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a really good way to put it. And so we talked about this a few times in previous videos for the Explaining Hajj series as well. But that's why, like, even for all of these Muslims around the world who aren't on Hajj and aren't actually there, these first 10 days are considered to be the best days of the year. And they'll end up with Eid at the end. And so people all around the world are also doing this sacrifice. And also, even though this year, because of COVID, they're limiting how many people can go, it's still such a special time for all of us. It's still such a special time for all of us. And it's, 10 of the most blessed days of the whole year. The last thing that I wanted to just talk about was when exactly it happens. So we talked about a little bit, like, it happens after the day of Arafah, but like, what do the pilgrims have to finish doing before the sacrifice could take place?
All right. So is after the Arafah. After we come off the mountain at Arafah, we spend the night in Muzdalifah. And that's just kind of out in the plains, sleeping out under the stars. We spend the night, and we come to Mina. Again, we the Jamarat again, which have we talked about stoning the Jamarat?
Talked about stoning. Yeah, so we come back to do our last stoning.
So we do the stoning of the Jamarat, then we go ahead and offer the sacrifice, and then finally, after that, for the men, we shave our heads. For the women, you cut off a little bit of hair, but yeah, that's when I had to grow a little hair because I am follicle challenged, so I had to grow hair while I was on my first Hajj to make sure I had something to cut. But yeah, then you shave your head, and again, and that kind of completes. Well, those are the major rites of Hajj, and then you'll spend the next few days in Muzdalifah stoning the Jamarat, and those are the. So, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You did a great job. And so that's the basics about the sacrifice that happens during Hajj, and also the history behind it, and also why we celebrate during this time. So you'll see your Muslim neighbors maybe put up lights, maybe come over with some sweets, all that kind of stuff, because we have one of our two main holidays coming up at the end of the Hajj season. So I just want to thank Brother Ahmed Shaheed for coming and being a part of this. And I hope you guys will join us again on Thursday for the next part, on Tuesday for the next part of our Explaining Hajj series. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Thank you.